so they don't hear the
your
echo
head
anymore.
or whatever.
Let's stop too because you got all the background noise going on.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the SEMA collision repair and refinish stage. We're here this afternoon to talk a little bit about sublet documentation. So to my right, I have Mr. Michael Bradshaw with SCRS. You want to kick us off? What do we want to talk about first when it comes to sublet documentation?
So I think what we're seeing in the industry more and more as a collision repair shop, we're having to be reliant on outside businesses to perform certain tasks that we're running into with collision repair, and that could be anything from calibrations, maybe paint protection films, ceramic coatings, window tints, glass replacement, and I think we could just kind of focus on one of those areas maybe to start calibration. So as a shop that has to sublet an ADAS calibration, some of the things that we've run into as a shop are just ensuring that we're thoroughly researching that procedure on our own beforehand, and then providing that procedure to our local dealer. Because what we've seen far too often is dealers not really having a good understanding of the calibration procedures that need to be performed. They're not really doing those procedures in the manner that they should be done. So we've kind of set up some processes in our shop where we're going to pull the procedure, we're going to go over that procedure with the dealership, and we're going to make them take photos through the process to document that they've set up the calibration targets and went through that process in its entirety. What, Jeff, in your shop, what are some things you guys would do on a sublet calibration?
We generally leave that up to the dealer, but not just calibrations wise, but really any work when we send it to the dealer, we try and provide them with a list beforehand. It might be 5 or 6 things that we need them to do, whether it's we call it marrying the headlight or doing the wheel alignment, changing a wheel. We'll have a list provided for them, so A, they don't forget, but B, that when they write up their bill, it's documented. We don't sometimes the dealers like to get loosey-goosey and just say perform scans, one price. Well, that doesn't help us out legally, and it doesn't help the customer out safety-wise if we don't have everything in a detailed fashion there.
Yeah, what I always try to tell shops is, you want to make sure that whoever you're using for your sublet, that they're documenting it just like you would if you're doing it in your own shop. So you talk a little bit about calibrations and targets and understanding target placement, and making sure that they're taking those photos, but that they're doing something to confirm the measurement. Whether they're writing it on the floor or they've got a piece of tape that they put on the floor and it has the measurement and they're taking a picture. They've got the tape measure maybe pulled out so that you can see exactly where it's at, so that you have that confirmation, because really at the end of the day, if you don't have the support to say that it was done and it was done properly, what do you do if you ever have to go into court with it? I think you're in trouble. Then having somebody that's at the shop that when that vehicle comes back, somebody at the shop that has enough education and information on these systems that they can go out and test drive these things and make sure the systems are performing as designed.
So one of the things that I saw was shops would just send out a car to the dealer and say it needs to be calibrated. They didn't tell them, really anything about the car, and it would come back with a charge from the dealer for several $100s. Well, on the particular one that stands out in my mind, they had done a bumper cover with park sensors. But on that particular vehicle, there was no calibration required for park sensors. They were plug and play. So they charged, there was a $600 fee to that shop to calibrate something that they didn't need to calibrate because they didn't even look up the procedure to see if it needed anything. So, the dealer is going to do what they think you need them to do if you don't tell them exactly what they need you to do.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that's where the communication aspect becomes so important, right? Because they're not collision repairers. They're not looking for what we're looking for. They're not trained to think like we're trained to think. And so, one of the things that we've set up is having a standard form where we'll itemize what's been done to the vehicle, what modules have been replaced, and like I said, And I think it's really important for every shop, you know, as you're performing your blueprinting process and you're researching your OEM information, as the shop, it's your job to identify all the procedures and the tasks that are going to be done on that vehicle, and then relay that information to the dealer. Because if you're being reliant on another party to try to figure out what you've replaced, and as a part of that, what now they need to do to get it, get everything back working, you're just kind of setting yourself up for disaster. So I think, you know, a good standard practice is research the procedure, identify all the calibrations, pull any prerequisite procedures that are going to be done as a part of that repair process, and then document those items on a form or email or something that you can communicate with the dealer, where you've got a record that you communicated what needed to be done, and then you get communication from them on the back end and confirmation that it was done. And like Bud spoke to, you know, there are several ways we can validate that once we get it back to ensure it's all working properly.
Yep, and I guess that we talked about this a little bit at CIC the other day. There was a conversation or a presentation, and talking a little bit about, you know, the concern that some have that Shop A is charging X dollars for a calibration, and Shop B is charging, you know, something else. But the documentation to help everybody understand that this vehicle and that vehicle, it might be a similar system, but it's a much different calibration depending on requirements from the vehicle maker. So it's not always the same. So having all that documentation allows you to have that conversation with the customer, you know, whoever the third-party payer is. So, you know, it just makes everything easier for everybody. And again, yeah, like I said, I'm not an attorney, but if you ever land in court, you want to have this stuff to confirm that you made sure it was done right. Because there's some that think that liability ends when you send it to that sublet vendor, and that's not the way it works.
That's absolutely right.
No, it's absolutely true. And we've, you know, even though we're talking about ADAS, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about glass work. I came out when our sublet glass company was putting a windshield in, and I wanted to check which urethane they were using. They were working on a Mercedes-Benz, and he thought it was okay that they used brand A when, you know, especially the German manufacturers specifically require their urethane be used in order for that car to have, you know, structural integrity when the job is done. So I said, hey, you can't do that. We've already purchased the glue here from Mercedes-Benz, and this is what you got to use, you know. And he kind of argued with me a little bit. And
yeah, glass repair is just like anything else, right? You need pictures to support that the flange was prepped right, that you need documentation, you used the right material, that it had the right cure time before things were put back on the road. I mean, there's so many things out there, and what do we always say, Scott, with iCar? Always follow the vehicle maker recommendations.
Yeah, it's not really a recommendation. It is do this. You know, they put that out there. The information's there. We just have to follow it. You know, sometimes you have to educate yourself a little bit on how to find it. We try to help you do that a little bit with RTS. We have a glass replacement search to help them with that. And we also will highlight some of the things that they need to do for calibration as well. So it's not all inclusive on that section of the website, but at least gives them a starting point to kind of bring some awareness of what they need to be watching for when they're putting the windshield in.
Yep. I would think that another one that you guys have to watch pretty closely is things like wheel alignments. How many times do you have a customer picks a vehicle up and comes back 2 weeks later and says, my car's pulling to the right now? Oops, they hit a curb somewhere, but they didn't quite remember that.
Well, and again, we've had a lot of issues trying to use sublet vendors for alignments as well, and that's something we've actually brought in-house recently because of that. And you know, the thing with alignments that I think the majority of the industry misses is you've got a vehicle involved in a collision that needs an alignment, and you sub that alignment out. But many of the manufacturers, if there is a front toe adjustment made on that vehicle, now there'll be radar or forward-facing camera calibrations required as a result of that. And so again, most of these sublet alignment vendors they're not pulling the procedures. They're maybe not aware of that. And so as a shop, if you send that out to be aligned and just assume that they're taking care of everything because you've not done your due diligence on the front end, you're going to end up with you know, some issues down the road. And again, it just goes back to researching the information, and you know, it's a time-consuming process. But if if the work's put in up front, it saves a lot of problems in the end, especially when it comes to sublet items.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess if we kind of go back to your conversation about glass for a second, that ties into calibrations as well. You know, there's many manufacturers that have come out with position statements say, hey, you need to use OE glass because the frit and the camera and where it's located can cause some challenges. And I know that I've personally been out at a sublet vendor, or I guess a remote calibration company, that had a vehicle come in from a collision repair shop and they had replaced the windshield. They tried over and over and over to get the calibration to work, couldn't get it to work, and then realized that it was a sublet glass, or I'm sorry, an aftermarket glass in there. As soon as they switched to the OE glass, it calibrated immediately. So there's a lot of truth to what these, you know, I think some people look at it and say, well, it looks the same, looks close, but it's not.
We had a Sprinter van in the last year. It was actually a friend of mine. He had bought it used, and they had just changed the windshield in it. And I had to take this Sprinter van and drive it across town, and I felt almost sick to my stomach as I was driving this vehicle, and the windshield right through the driver's sight was wavy. There was something wrong, and I couldn't figure it out. And when I got back to the shop, I called this customer up and I said, "Hey, did you have the windshield changed?" And he goes, "No," but he goes, the guy that owned the vehicle prior to me did, and he asked me, he goes, "Why did it feel funny to you when you were driving?" And I says, "Yeah, I could. It was messing with my head. I was almost getting sick." And that's how bad some of these windshields are if they're not OE. That was the first one I've ever seen in my life that was that bad. But I was shocked that a piece of glass could be that bad.
You know, and that kind of goes to the root of the problem. We talked a little bit earlier about, you know, the service department not knowing, the glass companies maybe aren't as aware. They're not always up to date as you might think they are. You know, when the glass industry reached out to us, they were just struggling because they're like, what is all this ADAS stuff? What do we got to do with it? So you can't ever assume that, you know, it's part of their daily lives. And, you know, the service department's a great example. They're used to following a step-by-step procedure on, okay, we do this, then we do this, and okay, now it tells me I got to do this calibration. They're not used to, oh, okay, I went and did a wheel alignment, it goes out the door, now I have to do all these other things, because that's not something that's part of their normal process.
Yeah. The other piece of it is that, you know, the service, or the dealers, you know, service departments, they don't necessarily see these things needing repair as quickly as the collision repair industry does, right? We typically see it first. You know, somebody comes, buys their brand new 2021 vehicle and gets 500 miles on it and gets rear-ended. I can speak to that one, happened recently. And all of a sudden this thing needs a calibration because blind spot sensors and things in the back of the vehicle. So it's you know, you go to the dealer and they're not necessarily going to be as educated as you think they are initially on this stuff, because it doesn't hit the service centers as quickly as it gets to us in the shops.
And how many times have we asked a dealer to do something they told us it didn't need to be done, even though the procedure called for, you know, something entirely out? And I think that's why it's so important, again, just for the shops to understand that you've got to do your own research. You've got to identify this, because the dealers, while they may be the experts when it comes to, you know, servicing those vehicles, you know, for common warranty issues or things like that, or normal wear and tear issues on a vehicle, they're not the experts when it comes to servicing a vehicle after a collision. You know, that's our job, and as the expert, we have to do a job in a thorough manner to make sure we're doing the proper, complete repair according to the manufacturer requirements.
You know, I think another piece you have to, if we go back or continue the conversation on calibrations, is making sure that your sublet vendor has the space required to do it. Because a lot think that, well, if I can get this vehicle in here, into the space, and I can complete the calibration, that we're good. But there's reasons why the manufacturers say you have to have X feet in front of the vehicle and to the right of the vehicle and the left of the vehicle, because the surroundings can interfere and it could potentially pick something up that it shouldn't, and it may calibrate, but you're still going to have a problem. So you need to make sure it's right and that they're doing it in the right conditions. And that, I guess part of what brings this up for me is we've had a lot of conversations with folks as ICAR is looking at, you know, creating an ADAS role and training and some of the things that we're doing, and we have conversations with collision shops, and some that I think all of us would agree are premium shops. And one in particular we talked to we said, well, how do you handle your calibrations today if you're not doing it in-house? And they said, well, we use a sublet vendor. I said, that's great. Where are they doing the calibrations? Because I knew this person's shop and knew that they didn't have the space. And they said, well, he usually does it in the parking lot. I said, okay, big red flag. I'm not aware of any system that you can calibrate in a parking lot. So, you just have to make sure that the sublet vendors are doing things properly, because at the end of the day, the shop that's repairing the vehicle, not the sublet vendor, is the one that ultimately is on the hook.
Too, it's something as silly as not checking your own list that you wanted the dealer or the sublet vendor to do when you drop the vehicle off. This just happened to me again, and it's happened to me many times where I've picked a vehicle up where we've asked to have a wheel changed or a tire changed, and they may have put a new tire on, and even though we said, hey, there's a brand new wheel for you right in the back of the vehicle, they didn't do it. And we just jump in the vehicle, we pay the bill, jump in the vehicle, and take it back to the shop. We get back to the shop and open the trunk, and there's that brand new wheel. Michael, I know that
That's happened to us before,
we
too.
think we check that more often. I'm going to have to start, not taking the dealer's word for what they did, and just double checking some of the simple things, because now you got to go back to the dealer. It's another half an hour or hour wasted time back and forth, and that's no good for anybody.
Agreed. So, well, we've had a lot of conversation about sublet up here. Has anybody got anything else to add on sublet documentation? No? All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.